Follow the buzzer. Rest in peace. Woo! The best there is, the best there was, and the best ever will be. What you gonna do, brother? Hey, yo.
Can you see me now?
Strategy my Oklahoma ass.
Life sucks, and then you die.
Welcome to the JM Report. I'm your host, GoodOlJM, coming to you from CSP Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling, on this June 28th, 2019, post Stomping Grounds. And boy, is there a lot to say about that show before, during, and after. And unfortunately, if you're with WWE, not all good. Not good at all. And I'll discuss that. Also, I should turn off my phone. Also, the, I guess, aftermath, if you will, on Raw and Smackdown. The changes, if you haven't noticed them for the past couple of weeks now on TV. And a lot of people coming to the assumption that the end is near for WWE. They're going to go down. They're going to lose fans, and ratings will drop even more so than ever before, and so on and so forth. Well, if that's the case, I got some news from you. No, and that's not going to happen anytime soon, not because I say so, or not because any other experts are going to say, or even agree with any of those claims or assumptions. They're going to keep moving forward because they have a lot, and I mean a lot of financial backing. The WWE, that is. With their sponsors, with their annual, 2-show-a-year deal in parts unknown. Not to mention the upcoming billion-dollar deal, I believe in September or October of this year, with Fox for Smackdown to debut, I believe, for the first time ever on that network. So the money's rolling in. It may not seem like it on TV, storyline-wise or angle-wise, feuds, creative, among other things. But the money's rolling in because, one, they're a publicly traded company. Two, they've partnered up with so many other companies, agencies, third parties, if you will, that does a lot of good. And this buzz, for lack of a better term, brings in attention. It draws attention to others. Like, they're so involved with Make-A-Wish. They're so involved with these charities for example, Connor's Cure and Susan G. Komen, and a bunch of other charities that they donate their time and money. And of course, you're going to get attention out of it. Positive, mostly. And through that, they make deals where either it's a sponsorship or advertisement, just air my commercials during your replays, or when you do your picture-in-picture replays, or hell, I don't think they have it yet, but pretty soon they're going to start having sponsorships or advertising during interviews. Like, this interview is brought to you by Lugs or IcoPro or whatever they got going on now. And they'll have the logo somewhere in the corner while AJ Styles, for example, is being interviewed. The real funny part would be if AJ Styles actually, when he's done, I'm going to see you this Sunday. I'm going to take you down, rip you apart, limb from limb. By the way, don't forget to purchase new lugs. if these guys ever make a deal with Disneyland, Disney World, or Disney in general, yeah, I think they'll be in real good hands. So, Stomping Grounds. You know what? I'm just going to run through the results. The show overall, I thought was okay. Couldn't help the fact, and I'm sure a lot of you did, even before the show went on the air, because there were a lot of people. Let me rephrase that. There were people in the Tacoma Dome where at maximum capacity can hold nearly 23,000 people, and that's just a rough estimate, but still near 23,000 people. Of course, with staging and entrances and ramping and camera setups and lighting and all that for in this case a wrestling event or maybe even a boxing event, it's going to trickle down to about maybe anywhere between 18 to 20,000 capacity. If you haven't heard by now, the rough estimate as to how many paying ticket holders were in attendance for Stomping Grounds, about 4,500. 4,500. By the time it was all said and done, nearly 6,000 fans were in attendance for Stomping Grounds. Because by that time, tickets were just being given away, trying to fill that thing up to the best of their ability. Hell, there were even reports that the general ticket sale, they were doing 2 for 1. Not enough. Now, is that to say because the card was so weak? Is that to say this is the fans' way of saying, yeah, we don't like the product the way it is. It's boring. You're not living up to the promises that the big-ass speech you all gave back in December of 2018 about changes, new match types, new this, new that. And I knew, I'm sure a lot of you knew too, that was all just for show. There was a lot of big noise, and every time there is, and you notice that they've been doing this a lot lately, every time there's big enough noise, they have no choice but to address it. Before this, I'm sure I'm missing a couple, but before this, the biggest change they ever made, and they had no choice to, was to rename the Fabulous Moolah Memorial Battle Royal for WrestleMania a couple of years ago. And by the way, I saw the Viceland documentary on that, not specifically on the name change, but about the life and career of the Fabulous Moolah just last night, matter of fact. And wow. I would say about half the things I already knew or heard about somewhere. Other things made me question what I thought I used to know. And everything else was, holy crap, that really happened. And of course, documentaries usually are filled with proven facts, or in this case, just hearing both sides of the story. And yes, Fabulous Moolah is not here to defend herself in any way, but she did have a daughter. She did have a couple of her closest colleagues from her wrestling camp. And of course, you got the opposite side. So it's a he said, she said conversation, basically. But from Jim Cornette, one of them who played the role of historian here during this piece, yeah, I mean, I'll believe Jim Cornette over everyone else that, from that time era, from the 70s, early 80s, because everyone else just, they've changed their stories, I feel. But not to get too far off track here, but WWE not living up to their promises. They seem to found loopholes within loopholes as far as, well, no more authority figures. Yeah, but Shane McMahon's still around, who ironically was one of the 4 who addressed the public back in December. No more automatic rematches for the championship. Yeah, okay, well, again, found loopholes. Fast forward to most recently, wild cards. The wild card rule after they did their draft. it's it's kind of back to the old days, just as the Attitude Era was wrapping up. And to a lot of people, it made sense where if a storyline begins on Raw, logically, it should roll into SmackDown while you try to either create new ones or continue other storylines as well. Sometimes you'll give one storyline a break and return to it the following week and give that one a chance to shine on both Raw and SmackDown and basically rotate it around. So giving this one guy credit, bro, that he was able to make everyone relevant in the WWE. Everyone had a storyline. And the majority of them were carried from one show to the other. And then he had a partner to help him out. A lot of angles, a lot of storylines were very questionable. Well, between questionable and controversial, because a lot of that stuff back then will definitely not fly now. So, point being, it's been described as an army of writers. But Vince McMahon, I believe, corrected that terminology on the Stone Cold podcast, the first one they had on the network, and said, "No, we don't have that many. You know, I think he said about 20, if not less." But still, I mean, that sounds like an army of writers for both shows, and then later on they were split. There's one writing team for SmackDown, one for Raw. It's pretty obvious that the focus is on the main card guys, or whomever Vince McMahon decides to promote, so to speak, from mid card to upper card. Everybody else is just a second thought. In hindsight, there seems to be a slow rotating wheel where for a long time, in recent time, fans were complaining of certain superstars not being on television for a long period of time. And that's true. Remember when the Viking Raiders debuted after how many name changes and having identity crises? They disappeared even after dropping surrendering, I should say, the NXT Tag Team Championships. Of the 6 call-ups of NXT specifically, a little more than half of them are successful, or at least in the limelight. Lacey Evans, Heavy Machinery, even though they were absent for quite some time. EC3, which I talked about during my Raw review. Lars Sullivan, that had a start and stop. Unfortunately, now it started again recently, earlier on in the year, and now it stopped again due to injury. Then there was Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. Unfortunately, Ciampa got injured, was injured, working through the injury, but it got more serious as it went on, and had to drop the NXT title. They could have continued, I believe, with Gargano. I mean, even when Ricochet was called up, he was still doing multiple angles on NXT and on Raw and on SmackDown when he was teaming up with Aleister Black, even though that was the, I guess, replacement team for Gargano and Ciampa. I really didn't understand. Okay, I understand Ciampa's out. He's going to be out, but you can do a lot with Gargano. So some of the plans didn't work out. And I looked at it as during that period, okay, they're trying, especially with these NXT call-ups. And for a long time, they were not considered part of the main roster yet. So what's been going on lately? I believe, and I'm sure this might have been by design or a complete coincidence, I don't know if anyone had stepped forward to shed a light on this, and to prove otherwise, I believe had it not been for the creation of the 24/7 championship, we wouldn't even see said individuals that have been missing in action on both Raw and SmackDown to make them somewhat relevant. If you think about it, they're all mid-carders. I'm calling them the 24/7 roster. And if you notice, it's the same faces. You would think week after week they would add maybe one or two more, unless they think or someone's spoken on, or, I've been to the top, I've been champion, I main evented a WrestleMania. Me being part of that 24/7 deal is just going to be maybe a demotion or an insult or what. Point being, you don't see Shinsuke Nakamura, you don't see Rusev chasing around R-Truth around the arena or backstage to get a shot. I mean, yeah, an argument can be made. Well, Jinder Mahal's a former WWE champion, and he's doing all the chasing around. Look at Matt Hardy and such. Well, we can argue here all day if you want. But it always comes down to, and the argument usually ends 9 out of 10 times, what ends up on TV is what Vince McMahon decides to. I don't know if Shinsuke or Rusev were ever even mentioned in conversation as far as who should be part of this 24/7 roster. But I know I've gotten way off track here because I was trying to cover the results of Stomping Grounds, their first ever pay-per-view with this name, hopefully the last. Took place last Sunday night on June 23rd in Tacoma, Washington. The kickoff was a triple threat match for the Cruiserweight Championship as Akira Tozawa, Drew Gulak, and Tony Nese, who defended the title. An amazing match. Don't know why this was regulated to the kickoff. If anything, there was another match I'm gonna get to later on that should have been on the damn kickoff, but whatever. But at the end, we see Drew Gulak finally getting his hands on, well, not gold, but silver or platinum, whatever that thing's made out of, and purple, as a new Cruiserweight champion. Gulak has been basically adding stock, if you will, to his career, jumping between 205 Live and most recently in NXT, and having a great feud there with Kushida after his debut. And I was hoping for him to be champion much sooner. Gulak, that is. I've always loved. He has a built-in heel name, Gulak. I mean, you hear that name, you know that he's got to be a bad guy. I mean, besides being a great wrestler, total bad guy. But as a fan, I was very excited to see this. That finally he got his hands on the title as the new Cruiserweight champion. The main show opened up with Becky Lynch defending her Raw Women's title against Lacey Evans. Pretty good match here. Lacey definitely stepped up her game from the last time we saw her in the ring. I believe it was against Charlotte. There were so many botched spots, so many loud spot calls. It might have been. I'm giving Lacey the benefit of the doubt. Might have been some butterflies in her stomach, but here she pretty much kept up with Becky Lynch here. But at the end, it was Becky tapping out Lacey Evans to retain her Raw Women's title. This is the match that should have been on the kickoff. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn taking on the New Day members of Big E and Xavier Woods. Little more than 10 minutes here. And considering how the rest of the week went for Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, this outcome made no sense. But Owens and Zayn defeating the New Day, to me, it was like, okay, where are they going with this? And when I get to the Raw and SmackDown reviews, I'm sure some of you were going to scratch their heads as well. In one of the matches of the night for the United States Championship, talk about a stiff, hard-hitting, flesh-on-flesh elbows, forearms, fists, kicks. These guys beat the shit out of each other. Samoa Joe defending his United States title against Ricochet. Both men looked great in this match. And it took not one but two 630 Swanton bombs off the top rope for Ricochet to put down the big Samoan and got the pin. 1, 2, 3. Ricochet is your new United States champion in the WWE. This coming off his North American title run in NXT. So looks like they have a lot of good faith in Ricochet moving forward. I'm not saying he's going to be Universal or World Heavyweight Champion anytime soon, but it's a good omen to see where he stands, at least backstage with creative and maybe even Vince and the other agents. So good showing. And of course, he will follow up the next night on Raw with a match one-on-one with AJ Styles, which I'll get into. For the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, Daniel Bryan and Rowan against Heavy Machinery, Otis, and Tucker. I thought it was a pretty good, entertaining match here. There was at least one spot where Heavy Machinery looked like they were going to dethrone the champions, but at the end it was Bryan, the hometown hero, because they had a feeling, they had to have known going in, Bryan was going to get heavily cheered, and there was no way, even if Heavy Machinery were to win the titles here, they weren't going to get the reaction that they wanted. So I doubt they were going to go with the Heavy Machinery championship win here, but just go with it. Bryan's going home, his hometown. He's a champion with Rowan, I should say, excuse me. And yeah, just have them go over. Not often you hear or assume that, well, they actually made a common sense call, a common sense decision there. So, wow, kudos. So yeah, Rowan and Daniel Bryan retain their SmackDown Tag Team titles. Bayley and Alexa Bliss with Nikki Cross in her corner for the SmackDown Women's title. Alexa, since coming back from her, I didn't get a chance to catch her, 24/7 or 365 documentary on the network. I didn't get a chance to catch it just yet, although I read a lot of positive praises about it. And she does discuss when she was concussed. Now, going on that, I'm going to take a shot in the dark here and carefully place Alexa Bliss in the ring and have her do only specific spots at specific times in the matches. Like, for example, this week on Raw, she had a match. She only took one bump, and that was the end of the match, which I'll get into. But here, a little bit of a miscue, a little bit of distraction involving Nikki Cross, but it cost Alexa Bliss, unable to win the SmackDown Women's title from Bayley, as Bayley retains. Roman Reigns defeats Drew McIntyre. There was so many distractions here by Shane McMahon's part, but it was not enough, and Roman Reigns overcame the odds, even though it was yet to be over with this storyline. In a steel cage match, Kofi Kingston defended his WWE Championship against Dolph Ziggler. Kingston will retain by leaping through the ropes over Dolph Ziggler to get by the steel cage door and retain his title. Ziggler was inches away. All he had to do was drop. He was crawling underneath the bottom rope, trying to get through the steel cage door. Ziggler, who was a few feet away on the other end, sees this and with all his remaining strength leaped up and jumped between the top and middle ropes over Dolph Ziggler's body and hit the arena floor, obviously both feet hitting the ground, and the referee calls for the bell to end the match. This was the longest match on the card, clocking in at exactly 20 minutes. The match itself, it was what it was. I don't think too many people were expecting high spots like superplexes off the top of the cage or anything like that. Really, really unnecessary for Stomping Grounds show, and considering that the audience was what it was. And speaking of the audience, as at 6,000 capacity, well, not capacity, but from the ones that attended, they made it sound as loud and as rumbling as possible, because everybody was asked from the hard camera side that we didn't see because everything was all tarped off or curtained off. Everyone was asked to go to the opposite side. And I was wondering, even in the beginning of the show, on the arena floor, it looked like it was overcrowded. So I don't know if they knew exactly where to sit people because they had different tickets, weren't sitting in the exact same spot or the opposite spot they would have sat in on the other end of the arena. So it seemed a little confusing. It took some time. But again, giving credit where it's due, the crowd in Tacoma really made it sound like as if it was 20,000 capacity as it should have been for a show like this, although it wasn't all that, but enough to make it sound like as if, yeah, this is a live audience, very, very vocal. That's the word I was looking for. And yeah, they were really into this match here, and we're proud and happy to see that Kofi retained. So kudos to the Tacoma, Washington audience who attended Stomping Grounds. And in the main event, which, considering how it ended, should not have been, Seth Rollins to defend the Universal title against Baron Corbin for the 97th time. And Corbin finally choosing his referee, and it was Lacey Evans, which was a surprise to a good amount of people. More so because, Lacey Evans is a woman, and we're not going to see Rollins beat the hell out of her with a steel chair, are we? Well, the last time something like that happened was the two-man power trip, Stone Cold Steve Austin beating the crap out of Lita on that episode of Raw. It's cringeworthy to see it now, but back then it was like, wow, they went there. They actually went there. I mean, forget about intergender matches, but we're talking about a man beating the shit out of a woman with a steel chair across her back. And it's on YouTube for those who are curious, who've never seen it or it's been a while. Yeah, something like that will never fly again today. So, knowing that Corbin had his full advantage and that Rollins had the stack against him, Rollins would powerbomb Corbin through the announce table, thinking that he'll get the countdown victory. But Lacey Evans stopped about at the count of 8. She brings over the ring announcer and tells him to say this match is now no countouts. Of course it is. Later on, Corbin will use a chair on Rollins. Once again, Lacey brings over the referee and says this match is now no disqualification. It must have been a while, or I don't know, just decided to ignore that side of my brain, because when something like this happens and it's so ridiculous, even for the storyline. But even as a special guest referee, when have ordinary referees make decisions on the fly? Well, I mean, sure, if you're an authority figure, but Lacey is not to my knowledge, and makes up the rules as they go. For something like that, and Shane was involved a little bit with Baron Corbin when they had that little staple together, whatever they were called. Matter of fact, I don't think they even had a name for it before they went their separate ways, before Dolph broke away from McIntyre, and then eventually Corbin broke away from Lashley and McIntyre as well, ironically. So there's history there. See, that's something that Shane, if they wanted to, could have had Shane come on stage and just announce, hey, no countouts. 5 minutes later, hey, no DQ. And you can hear and feel it in the audience that at some point, Becky Lynch needs to come down here. And the crowd, I think, erupted a little bit more when they realized, oh, no DQ. So Becky now has to come down and beat the shit out of Lacey here. So that didn't take too long, as Rollins was questioning Lacey's tactics. And she slaps him twice. and then delivers a low blow. We got a near fall out of it. And finally, here comes Becky to beat the snot out of Lacey Evans. She's out of the picture. Referees come down to break up that fight. Corbin, thinking that he has Rollins right where he wants it, right for the pickings, tells a referee, Cone, who had history because of the Super Showdown incident when they got into a shoving match and it cost Corbin, supposedly, a chance at the title. So one kick to the gut, a curb stomp at Stomping Grounds. Rollins retains the Universal title. And you would think they had maybe, 10 minutes to spare, maybe 15. But you would think the way they were going, they were really milking the fact that, yes, we know. Either we figured it out long before you even addressed it, or it was no secret after a while that Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins are dating. You might even consider them the power couple. And then I wouldn't go as far as say the new Triple H or the new Stephanie. No, hell no. The fact for the past couple of weeks leading up to Stomping Grounds that they being WWE, shoving this down our throats. We see them backstage. They were interacting with each other. Yeah. I mean, even if they weren't dating, at least you make it look like they're dating on air for storyline purposes. But once, twice maybe is enough. But here, and considering what took place the following night on Raw, which I'll get into in just a second, it's overkill. It's going to be overkill if they keep doing this. But hopefully it will come to an end real soon as far as not having to be an on-air couple as opposed to their private life. And I don't know about Becky Lynch's previous relationship that was kept out of the public eye, best I could tell. Rollins, on the other hand, well, one too many selfies were taken and shared to have it, quote, leaked to the public because of your girlfriend not getting along with your wife, even though I believe Rollins was already separated at the time. But yeah, some things like that you just want to avoid, and it didn't work out for anybody as far as that relationship goes. But you live and learn. So the way it ended with the celebrating the both Becky and Seth holding up their arms and the winners and whatnot, we literally just followed them from that celebration all the way to the back of the staging up the rampway. And they finally go off the air showing off the little copyright logo and this and that. Well, why all that extra time? Especially if you weren't going to get a cash in or a tease. I mean, they could have coughed up maybe a million or two just to have Brock come on stage and tease like, hey, I still got my briefcase. And then go off the air like that. Like, oh, he's not cashing in? Okay, well, I'll see you guys tomorrow night on Raw. It reminded me of that one takeover show where DIY broke up and Ciampa just beat the snot out of Gargano on stage. They did everything. They follow him in the ring celebrating up the rampway. They stop on stage. They turn around, acknowledge the crowd one last time. Arms up in the air celebrating, and out of the blue, and you can hear the audience, Ciampa turning on Gargano, and they already did the copyright little logo in the corner. You'd think they're about to go off the air, but no, it kept going. So I don't know if that was by design or intentional, but definitely shows the different production team involved at the time, although I think some of the main roster WWE production team has spewed into the NXT. And it shows, unfortunately. Just look at the constant seizure zooming in and out of with the camera. That wasn't always there with NXT, if you think about it. That's one clue. That's one sign. But other than that, dragging of the ending there didn't help the show much. I mean, like I said, I thought it was okay at best. The crowd did their best to make it feel and sound like a big deal show, pay-per-view. But, reports are coming out before and during the show that there's not even half of us here. People taking selfies and pictures, putting them on social media. Of course, WWE Didn't make any statement as far as I know. Did not address this. I don't think they ever do. But, life goes on. Life goes on. And matter of fact, something very similar happened with Raw the next night, that it was not filled to capacity. And they topped off or darkened certain areas of the arena. With that said, Raw begins with Universal Champion Seth Rollins. The man doesn't even get one word out, and here comes Becky Lynch. Like, hey, you kind of interrupted me here. And Becky Lynch just recaps the events of the night before on Stomping Grounds. Baron Corbin's music hits. He's on stage, makes his way down the ramp, but from behind, back in the ring, Lacey Evans jumps Becky Lynch. Corbin runs down and attacks Seth Rollins, so we got a brawl between the four, and eventually are broken up. And the heels get on the microphone and challenge, who didn't see this coming, challenge both Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch to an intergender mixed tag team match for Extreme Rules. And Lacey basically placed the stipulation. So this is where the absence of an authority figure takes shape, and you got the wrestlers making the calls instead. Lacey challenged for both the Universal and Raw Women's title in the same tag team match, and Baron Corbin stressed it to make sure we all heard it right. Winners, plural, take all. And Becky basically raised the bar a little higher. Then fine, we accept. But as long as this is the absolute last time you two have a chance or a crack at these championships, because we're tired of you. We want to move on. Which is true. I mean, if anything, this should have taken place the night before. But, there's time to kill and fill in before we get to SummerSlam. In an 8-man elimination tag team match, we have the Raw and SmackDown tag team champions of the Revival and Rowan and Daniel Bryan teaming up, taking on the Usos and Big E and Xavier Woods. I should point out that any individual that gets pinned or defeated in general, he and his teammate are eliminated. So Bryan clotheslines Woods over the top rope, and he was about to set up for a suicide dive. We don't see this on camera, but unfortunately, Bryan ends up hitting Scott Dawson instead. Despite the little miscue there, Bryan heads back into the ring. He rolls up Xavier Woods for a near fall. As Woods kicks out, Bryan stumbles into the ropes, and Wilder delivers a forearm shot to Daniel Bryan, and this causes him to be eliminated by the New Day. A few moments later, Xavier Woods is eliminated after getting hit by Shatter Machine by the Revival. And we're down to the Revival and the Usos. And at the end, the Usos end up pulling out a page out of Power and Glory's playbook, delivering the Powerplex. I couldn't tell who was who, but let's just say Jimmy superplex Dawson off the top rope, and Jay come off the other top rope with a body splash to pin and eliminate the Revival to win the match. I'm not sure if there's going to be any more follow-up between the Revival with Bryan and Rowan, as if there was a miscue, because there was no follow-up to this the next night on SmackDown. So I don't know if there will be a champion versus champions match anywhere down the road. But then again, both teams are heels, so what sense would that make? Something else to point out, this week there was no Firefly Fun House episode. However, it seems like the puppets have been released or maybe escaped the Funhouse, because we see The Miz heading to the ring for his Miz TV segment, and Abby the Witch is seen in the background, just popping up from behind the equipment. It's interesting to point out as well that the commentators from both Raw and SmackDown didn't point this out. It was almost as if it was an Easter egg, if you will, as many fans took to social media to describe this, because usually commentary, we're like, what is that back there? What is that? Abby the witch puppet? No, they just completely ignored it and went to commercial from this point. And we are shown footage of Braun Strowman pulling a huge semi-truck without the trailer behind it as he's preparing for his tug-of-war match versus Bobby Lashley. So that truck has to weigh a ton or two. Lashley is just under 300 pounds, so it shouldn't be no problem because we see Strowman just pull this thing a few feet across the pavement. So it should be no problem. So Miz TV is on the air with special guests Carmella and 24/7 champion R-Truth. They get interrupted by Drake Maverick, who is still in his suit he wore at his wedding last week. Only except his tie is now is a headband, similar to Rambo. Looking very depressed. And, well, speaking of relationships, it's out of the box, I guess, the cat. Carmella and Corey Graves are official. They are dating. So, sorry if I just broken a few hearts out there thinking that they got a shot at Carmella. Man, maybe even Corey, but oh well. So here, Maverick makes his way to the ring, blaming R-Truth for what happened at his wedding, that immediately his bride-to-be wanted a divorce. Renee Michelle. And I just want to point out, last week, I wasn't obviously I was aware because I saw the photo stills. I didn't see the actual video until Stomping Grounds aired it, and I didn't know why Renee Michelle was in a red wedding dress. Now, they weren't reenacting the red wedding or anything like that, or an episode out of Game of Thrones, but it's like, okay, that's interesting. My first thought was that Miss Michelle, or the new Mrs. Maverick, was of West Indian descent. And I was wrong. She is of Native American descent. And that's as far as my information has gotten. I try to find a little bit more information about her background a little bit. But the wedding itself looked as if it was a West Indian ceremony. So I don't know if that's part of her as well, besides being Native American. Yeah, she was part of the Mae Young Classic. So if I might have, or if I did have any misunderstanding, or if someone felt insulted by that, I apologize. I was not aware. This is why I do research. At the time it happened, that angle, that bit, if you will, I was already heading to the studios, and I just caught a few photo stills on social media and had no time to play the video back to be aware of exactly what happened. So again, my apologies. But Maverick was blaming R-Truth for everything, and that he wants another opportunity to win back the love of his life. And Carmella is like, oh, you mean your wife? Like, no, the 24/7 championship. There had to have been an impromptu spot here. Maverick hesitated to say, but eventually did, that the the relationship wasn't consummated yet. So Truth suggested, oh my goodness. Truth suggested Maverick to take fiber. And everybody looks confused. It's like, yeah, he said he was constipated. And if you go back, if you missed it the first time, and watch Carmella's reaction, I mean, she could not stop laughing. So I don't know if if it was impromptu on the spot, then obviously nobody knew, including her. But if she missed rehearsals or something like that, to laugh, that kind of genuine laugh to where she couldn't even breathe, that's entertaining. And only Truth. I want to believe that Truth is able to improv a lot of his material. So Maverick challenges R-Truth right there and there for a championship match. And this whole time, apparently, Miz had an earpiece saying, oh, I'm just being told. You're full of shit. I'm being told that the match, if Truth would accept, will take place right here, right now, and that the 24/7 rule will be lifted until after the match. So everybody clears out. They remove the high chairs. Everybody's gone. The bell rings, and the bell rings. Well, Maverick, they get a few offensive knee strikes in there. He hits the ropes, and Truth catches him in a downward spiral and gets the pin to win and retain the title. And as soon as that happens, here comes the 24/7 roster chasing Truth around the ring for a little bit. He gets into the ring and catches a stiff-looking kick to the head from Cedric Alexander. He tries to pin Truth, but No Way Jose is there to break it up. Jose tries to pin Truth, but that gets broken up, and the chase is on through the crowd. Backstage, we see Roman Reigns prepping up for his 2-on-1 handicap match versus Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre. Of course, there is no tagging in or out for the heel team. Shane McMahon was set up for his coast to coast. Then all of a sudden, there's a gong and the lights go out, and Renee Young screams, "No!" I mean, she sounded like she was playing a video game and the power went out, or forgot to save the game and now has to start over. So, guess who shows up as the lights and the gong go back off again, or the lights come back on and the gong goes off again? The Undertaker appears in the ring and attacks both Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre, leaving this a no contest. And we will find out later on that The Undertaker and Roman Reigns team up to take on Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre at Extreme Rules. So, considering ratings for the most part, been kind of steady, but more leaning towards the lower end of things. The attendance from the night before, and even here on Raw, did someone pull or break the glass in case of emergency and bring back The Undertaker? I believe so. Especially when it's not advertised ahead of time that The Undertaker will make an appearance. But you do it this way, spark some interest, and maybe bring back the numbers a little bit more for next week to see what's going to happen. So we get the tug of war between Braun Strowman and Bobby Lashley. Really like the arm wrestling match the week before this. This added nothing to their feud. Lashley was on the verge of losing the tug of war, and he charges Strowman with the rope, and he wraps it around his eyes, not his jaw, not his neck, because that's a no-no, but his eyes, and he's basically raking Strowman's eyes with the rope and beats him down a little bit and leaves. Strowman is left blinded in the ring, and we cut to AJ Styles being interviewed, only to be distracted by the Good Brothers as they join the conga line of No Way Jose. Styles steps in and reminds them that, hey, they have a match later on with the Viking Raiders, and that they have a match together. Matter of fact, tonight, as I'm speaking, WWE is in Japan, and Triple H will team up with AJ Styles and the Good Brothers as a honorary member of the club. Kind of, sort of. Nikki Cross is apologizing to Alexa Bliss in the dressing room about what happened at Stomping Grounds and asking if there was anything that she can do to make up for it. Alexa has to think about it. This literally ran through the ending of this segment through commercial and then back again as Nikki is confronted by Natalya and Naomi, who are once again trying to bring Nikki to come around and make her realize that Alexa's been using her. So Alexa steps back into frame and it's like, oh, you're talking about me behind my back. So you would think there'll be a tag team match right there set up. Nope. Alexa one-on-one with Naomi. Early in the day, WWE put out an exclusive, quote-unquote, footage of Heath Slater trying to speak to Shane McMahon, but he was standing outside his office and his confronted by Mojo Rawley. So they were discussing about how Slater was looking to attempt to ask for another raise or another opportunity to ask for a raise. So these two talk shite back and forth, how one's more important than the other. So Slater decided to challenge Mojo Rawley to Raw later on the day. And we get to it, at least the introductions anyway, because coming down the ramp was R-Truth and the 24/7 roster right behind. So in the confusion, Truth hits the ring. For some reason, Mojo Rawley gets into a scuffle with other guys outside of the ring, and Slater rolls up Truth and wins the 24/7 title. So during Slater's celebration, Truth returns the favor and rolls him back up, wins the title back. Now at this point, Truth is trying to get out of Dodge, but he runs into Cedric Alexander, and Cedric rolls Truth up, and he wins the championship off of Truth. He's out of the ring, and here comes the biggest accomplishment of the night as EC3 runs into Cedric, and he rolls him up. You see what's going on here? And he wins the title. So it looked like EC3 was doing the right thing to celebrate and leave at the same time, but he barely gets halfway up the rampway because Carmella snatches the title out of EC3's hands. She's holding it up out there, distracting EC3, and from behind comes R-Truth. He rolls up EC3, wins back the title, and the chase is back on. You know, and there are people out there that hate this, and I understand. I honestly do. But at the end of the day, there is no argument the fact, I mean, it's not everyone that I mentioned before, but at least those that are involved with these 24/7 segments, they are getting their TV time. May not be exactly what you want to see them be used as, especially talent like EC3, talent like Cedric, among others. But it's TV time, and at least for the time being, can no one say, oh, they're not using EC3 at all? Well, he just won the 24/7 title, as brief as it was, not even a cup of coffee. But he's there. Now, I wouldn't necessarily jump to conclusions like, well, this is what they're only using me for. Thankfully, my contract is about to expire. I'm going to leave. Well, I thought the same thing about Mike Kanellis and Maria, but they resigned. They're going to be sticking around for at least another 5 years. Mojo Rawley did the same thing. Probably his reward for doing such a thing. I'll give him a TV spot on Raw. Like I said before, money is coming in. If not already, it's already there. In comparison, the schedule might be a little bit more hectic to independent bookings or AEW. I understand. But in all fairness, they may not be making the same money in, for example, AEW than they will with WWE. Can they match it? Maybe. Who knows? But AEW is still developing. Maybe in a couple of years, maybe more than that, when they have a steady income and leftover money that they can lure in or sign up new talent and have them make more money than they could when they were with WWE. This is one of the few occasions where I would say AEW, for now, has a battle they can't win here as far as trying to get talent to sign up. But moving on. Kofi Kingston, WWE champion in the ring, about to be interviewed, but it gets interrupted by Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. And out of the blue, Sami Zayn and Owens have their talk show, basically telling Kingston of all the opponents that he's defeated since becoming champion, he did not beat them on his own. Kingston and Sami eventually get into a match after being challenged. Kingston rolls him up. And then Owens, who's upset about this, challenges Kingston right away for another match. And this one didn't take long either, as he hits his SOS on the outside of the ring at the bottom of the rampway. Kingston runs back into the ring and gets the win via countout. So 2 quick victories for the WWE champion here. As he's leaving and celebrating, again with his back turned, Samoa Joe attacks and chokes out with the Coquina Clutch Kofi Kingston, leaving him laying. And now we know at Extreme Rules, Kofi Kingston, I almost said coffee, Kofi Kingston will defend the WWE Championship against Samoa Joe. So we get to the Naomi versus Alexa Bliss match. Alexa Bliss took absolutely no bumps except for the finish, where Naomi was distracted by Nikki Cross outside of the ring. Bliss delivers a DDT and pins to win on Naomi. This brings out Natalya to argue the outcome. And we go to commercial. We come back. Guess what? We got a tag team match. Why wasn't this the original idea to begin with? But the tag team match, well, didn't do much. At the end, Nikki Cross hits a swinging neckbreaker onto Natalya. This comes after a blind tag was made when Natalya tackled Nikki into a corner and Alexa Bliss tagged herself in. Neckbreaker. Here comes Alexa, and she pins Natalya for the win. Of course, Nikki Cross does have a confused look on her face. Alexa says something which we can't really hear, and everybody's all smiles again as they win and just scatter off. For the first time ever in WWE, the new United States champion Ricochet versus AJ Styles. The match started off a little slow, and then the Good Brothers head to ringside. Styles sees this and tells them to leave. He's going to win it on his own. One-on-one. No interference, no distractions. So he asks them to leave. We go to commercial, and essentially the match continues, but they're calling it a restart. I mean, it's not like life has an actual reset button like the old Nintendo box does. But the match itself was amazing. Although I thought the Ring of Honor matches were much better. But, it is what it is. It's a slow build-up if that's what they're going with. And at the end, it took one phenomenal forearm to deliver to Ricochet as AJ Styles defeated the United States champion. After the match, both men showed respect, handshaking, and hugging it out, as they say, as Raw went off the air. Shane McMahon opens up SmackDown on the Titantron, announcing what we already knew, but here he wants to publicly accept the challenge for Extreme Rules as he teams up with Drew McIntyre to take on The Undertaker and Roman Reigns. The New Day head to the ring, and Kofi Kingston addresses the attack from Samoa Joe and that he will prevail at Extreme Rules once again. Of course, this brings out Dolph Ziggler. I thought we were past this. But Ziggler interrupts, and that he wants to face Kingston once again in a 2 out of 3 falls match. And if Ziggler wins, he'll be added to the WWE Championship match at Extreme Rules, making it a triple threat. We see Daniel Bryan and Rowan walking around backstage, and Huskus the Pig makes his cameo. So once again, the puppets are loose backstage. Elias is standing outside Shane McMahon's office and gets confronted by The Miz. So Miz tells Elias to tell Shane that he wants yet another match with him. Miz walks away. Out comes Shane McMahon from his office. Elias delivers the message. So Shane makes a tweak to it, saying that if Miz can defeat Elias in a 2 out of 3 falls match, then and only then would he get his chance going once again one-on-one with Shane McMahon. SmackDown Tag Team Champions Bryan and Rowan take on the New Day of Big E and Xavier Woods, as the New Day will be victorious after hitting the up, up, down, down on Bryan. After the match, Owens and Zayn do a running attack, followed by Heavy Machinery to even up the odds. We go to commercial and come back, Guess what? I mean, seriously, guess what? Guess what? It's an 8-man tag team match. SmackDown Tag Team Champions Daniel Bryan and Rowan teaming up with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Which one of these is not like the other? To take on Heavy Machinery and The New Day. I'm going to get into a little bit of a rant after this, but Otis would hit his Caterpillar and elbow drop combo, followed by the compactor by Heavy Machinery to pin and win over Sami Zayn, as the baby faces Heavy Machinery and The New Day are victorious. In the first 2 out of 3 falls match of the night, Elias versus The Miz. Elias takes the first fall after interference by Shane McMahon. The Miz nearly won the second fall with a pinfall after hitting the skull crushing finale on Elias, but Shane would interfere again, physically getting involved in the ring, and the referee calls for a DQ. This leads into the third fall. But before that can begin, Shane and Elias beat the crap out of The Miz. Referee finally gets order, and Elias simply drops an elbow and wins the third fall, so Miz will not get his opportunity again at Shane as they continue the beatdown even after the match. For the first time since the show at Parts Unknown, Finn Balor, the Intercontinental Champion, is seen backstage and contemplating who will be his next challenger. Enter Shinsuke Nakamura. I want to buy a round of beer for the person, whomever it was, that decided to go with this angle. You can't go wrong with Finn Balor and Shinsuke. Then again, they kind of dated with Shinsuke and AJ Styles a couple of years ago, but the plan there was to intentionally make Shinsuke a heel, and that was basically a death blow ever since then for poor Nakamura. SmackDown Women's Champion Bayley in non-title action taking on Nikki Cross. If Nikki Cross were to win, Alexa Bliss would get her automatic rematch at Extreme Rules. So, of course, Nikki counters a roll-up from Bayley and wins the match. So Alexa Bliss does get, or finds, I should say, a loophole in these automatic rematches. Get someone else to do your dirty work. Backstage, we see Carmella once again looking for R-Truth. Can someone just put a bell around his neck or something? Or his ankle or whatever? It'll go off, every time it goes off, it's R-Truth. If he's not hiding, then he's by, catering. But Carmella runs into Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose. And for those who missed it, Rambling Rabbit was in the background. Both sides were talking shite, but Deville and Rose would eventually walk away. Finally, Truth makes his presence known. And on the other side, we see Drake Maverick basically coming to make peace because he had no referee with him. Again, Maverick telling Truth of how important the title is to him. So Truth feeling a bit heartwarming on what what Maverick had to say, and tells Hornswoggle, as he calls him, sure, no problem. He'll just lay down right now, go get a referee, and he'll give him the belt. But instead, he psychs him out, laughs in his face, and it chases on again as the 24/7 roster is right behind him. Back in the ring, we see Ember Moon going one-on-one with Sonya Deville. Seems like forever ago that Ember Moon has not gotten revenge or payback, having her Nintendo Switch broken. The match itself didn't take too long as Rose defied enough distraction, Deville throwing Ember into the turnbuckle post, rolling her up for the pin. During the celebration, there was a bit of notable body language between Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose, perhaps teasing a romance between the two. Maybe their friendship has developed into something more that we're not aware of. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to complain. But it's interesting that I guess you could say it's been a slow buildup because there was talks about breaking them up. It never happened, especially after giving everybody tag team names. In their case, here is Fire and Desire. And the breakup never happened, at least the team breakup. But ever since the days of Absolution, it seems like these are the only two members of a stable or faction that stuck together long after the days of oh my goodness, what they call them? There was Paige's Team Absolution, and there was a name change for them as well. Oh, sorority submission or whatever it was that had to change the name. But anyway, again, considering that the women's tag team titles were resurrected, in a sense, they're going to have women tag teams together or create them as time goes on, such as the Kabuki Warriors. But back to SmackDown here. Hey, all I'm going to say is, and many of you may remember this, what was it, 2002, 2003, where Billy and Chuck, Billy Gunn and Chuck Palumbo, they teamed up, and as time went on, I don't think it was the idea from day one, but it just went there, probably because one too many chants from the fans. And it was implied, those are my words, but it was implied that Billy and Chuck were in love with each other, and even go as far as having the former manager or what they call him, their fashion designer or something like that. But it went as far as having them wed on an episode of SmackDown. Of course, this is when 3-minute warning was already introduced, and Eric Bischoff in disguise played the priest, the old man priest. And it was well done as far as the swerve, if you will. But unfortunately, there was some backlash. Not from WWE, but from a third party, because SmackDown was still being taped at this time. So the morning of, Billy and Chuck were on a talk show, or one of those morning news talk shows. And they were presented with a gift, basically for, I don't know how much intel they had, but basically the LGBT, now known as the LGBTQ, were beyond happy to see that there were two men on television that they were about to tie the knot, and they were given a gift. Unfortunately, someone had cold feet, and if you listen to Bruce Pritchard mentioning that it was Vince, at the last minute, changed it up, did not want to go through with it. So Billy and Chuck in storyline and in the ring, just as the priest was about to announce them as husband and husband, they panic, saying that they're not going to go through with it. It was just an act. If you think I'm going to marry this guy, you're crazy, and on and on and on. So needless to say, the LGBTQ community was very upset. That's not what they were told. That's not what they've heard. I don't know whatever happened or what came of the gift that was given to Billy and Chuck. But fast forward to today, obviously, at least especially in WWE, when the world changes, it's almost as if they're a step or two behind. They would eventually acknowledge said change in the world, but we'll never know, because by the time such change is shown or used in the storyline and or angle, it's like, yeah, dude, that was like months ago. So here we are, Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. I want to say maybe teasing that there is something more than just friendship there. And it would be hypocritical for anyone, including myself, to say they didn't go all the way with Billy and Chuck because they didn't want to see two men kissing on TV, especially on WWE programming. But it would be okay, since it's 2019, two women, especially on WWE program, because we've seen a lot more than that, than we've seen two men embracing the kiss between Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose. So if this is the angle, and if this is the story that they want to go with between Deville and Rose, they need to go all the way. I'm not saying have them get married. I'm not saying do a wedding, another wrestling wedding angle on TV or whatnot. I mean, they could. That won't come out to much later. But maybe the idea is that Deville's in love with Rose, doesn't know how to tell her. So for the next couple of weeks or so, let's say until SummerSlam, it's obvious by then. And Rose is not sure how to take it, doesn't know how to respond because they're friends. I'm not saying, don't break them up. No, because of the conflict, this particular conflict we're speaking of, no, don't break them up because of that. Let there be conflict, sure. But conflict as far as, well, it's uncomfortable around you because I don't know what to think. You're telling me you're in love with me, but I'm trying to get through a match. It's kind of things like that. Conflicts, yeah, but not complications where you got to break them up. As much sense as that makes, because it sounded better in my head. But personally, I'm all for this because, yeah, the world has changed ever since the early 2000s. And a lot more has changed than that too. Also, the sensitivity to be openly discussing anywhere on television, in public, social media, here, podcasting. Not to get too off track here, but I've known men and women who are part of the LGBTQ community. Times have changed, time has moved forward, and unfortunately we lost contact with each other. And if they're listening, I hope they're all doing well. They were probably the greatest people I had the pleasure of knowing. Very outgoing, very, very outspoken. I never had a time hanging out with them that they didn't pull any punches when it came to specific topics and conversation and conversation. And yeah, there were times where they will talk about their struggles and how unfair it is. And this is the time before they officially had their rights. It took a while, but eventually, state by state, I don't think not all of them have done it yet, as far as I know. But eventually, people in higher offices, wised up. I mean, it's part of doing the right thing. And to turn this into a storyline, we've seen plenty of outcomes that led to disappointment. And it's so easy to go back that, well, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have said that, and twist it around and come up with our own fantasy booking or fantasy storytelling. But if the end game here is to eventually have Mandy Rose come around, at least when it comes to on-air characters, don't get me wrong, and all of a sudden, art imitates life, and they end up dating together or each other. But the end game, if it would become that Rose and Deville accept each other as lovers, and then continue on to become women's tag team champions. Now, I know to some that's going to sound a little like, dude, what the hell? But it's a wrestling angle, and yes, it does involve a real life scenario dealing with the LGBTQ. And the last thing you want to do is do or say something on TV, live TV, where they have so many sponsors, so many advertisers, and don't be surprised, a lot of them also support the LGBTQ community. To upset them because something was said or done on TV from an angle that's not supposed to be taken seriously, but you can't convince everyone. And at the same time, for some, it might hit home. Whether it's a breakup, whether it's something, again, said or done that triggers a memory in someone, and you're going to have those hate tweets. You're going to have those hate emails. So I'm going to play devil's advocate, for lack of a better term. I'm just going to sit back and see where this goes. But WWE, hey, and they've done this before too. They start something, and then the next week it's all but forgotten. Probably from feedback, or that the old man decided, no, we're not going there, just switch it around. If they do, okay. Maybe somebody smart him up about something, or maybe something I said, or something else that came up. But if you're going to go all the way, then go all the way. The rest of SmackDown, Aleister Black still pissed off that no one's accepted his challenge. There is a knock on his door in this dark room, probably the janitor's closet. He gives a reaction where he's surprised that there's anyone knocking to begin with. For all we know, it could have been Zelina Vega wanting to go home. But we don't see or know who it was that was knocking on the door. Main event saw Kofi Kingston and Dolph Ziggler non-title match, 2 out of 3 falls. If Ziggler were to win, he'll be added to the WWE Championship match at Extreme Rules, making it a triple threat along with Samoa Joe. Kingston will win the first fall with a surprise roll-up. What's with these roll-ups? Jeez. I mean, does a finger poke of doom don't work anymore? We go to commercial, we come back, and Ziggler immediately wins the second fall. And you see what they did there, which I'll get to in a sec. But in the third fall, Kingston hits his Trouble in Paradise for the win, so Ziggler does not get added to the WWE Championship match at Extreme Rules. So, why have these 2 out of 3 falls? Why have so many tag team matches, and why have restarts or continuations in said match after commercial? Well, I believe that if I didn't cover it before last week, then I'll do it now. They're trying to avoid having actual wrestling, actual action in between commercials. So in other words, they want the live audience in attendance and the audience at home watching all at the same time when it comes to actual wrestling action in the ring. Which is interesting because back in the day, during Superstars and Wrestling Challenge, even when WWE was on the MSG network, and they were live, when it came to Superstars and Challenge, not all the time, but there were a handful of times during a match they had to cut the commercial. And when they come back, even a better example is the taped Saturday night's main events. When the match had to be stopped because of commercial, or not, don't stop the match, but the TV goes to commercial, the network. We come back from break, and pretty much the match picks up where it left off. And if ever there was a home video release, such as the best of Saturday night's main event, some of those matches were aired with commercial. But if you look at the matches listed in that particular DVD box set, it's shown in its entirety. There might have been a couple of fade to black and back in because that's when they cut to commercial. But if you stitch them together, you see that you didn't really miss anything. Not often was there, he's being kicked in the corner and the babyface is now on the ground trying to catch his breath and the referee's pulling back or pushing back the heel. They go to commercial. We come back. All we missed probably was the heel picking up the face from the corner, and he Irish whips him to the opposite side. And that's what we pick up coming back from commercial. So it's a lot of editing going on, especially when it's not live. But that was then. Now they just want to cut through the shenanigans of commercial. Well, we're at commercial. People at home are not going to see anything. I was all for the WWE Network being a part of this. When Raw or SmackDown went to commercial, just go to the network and continue the match. If you wanted, And that was a good idea to get traffic flowing through the network, especially during Raw and SmackDown. They'll just, whatever was running in the network will cut into the live feed of Raw, and the match continues. I mean, it was about 3 or 4 minutes long, but then you cut away and go back to the USA Network in this case. And then they stopped doing that. I never understood why. But not everything has to be tag team matches. Not everything has to be 2 out of 3 falls. I mean, the mouse will just rename it SmackDown 2 out of 3 falls or Smack 2 out of 3 down falls or whatever the hell. It's gonna get. It's already overkill. We're 2 weeks in, and 2 out of 3 falls. You can almost hear and see the grunts in the audience. But again, he just did this last week. I appreciate how stopping the action, pretty much. Thankfully, they will never call TNA during commercials. Even with the picture-in-picture that SmackDown only does, Raw, I think, literally only did it once. But it's possible. Not to mention, you still got commercials and you still got your advertisers and your other promotions and sponsors. That's what I meant to say. Whenever it's picture-in-picture. Be difficult probably when they have to rebroadcast it on the network a month or so later. But I'm sure the hard copy footage of the matches are available, where it doesn't go to picture in picture, and you have to show the sponsor because maybe their deal or their contract did not involve being shown on a network, or the company doesn't exist anymore, or a long-term deal, or it was a separate deal, entirely separate, and say, well, we're gonna re-air our old shows on our streaming service, but it shows your logo and your sponsor and all that. We don't have a deal anymore, so what would it take for us to show it uncensored and or recut or whatnot? I'm sure a deal had to be made. There's no way you can just automatically show your TV show, but it has third or fourth party logos and sponsors and advertisings without their permission or their acknowledgement. You're going to get sued. You will be sued. So that's Raw and SmackDown. I really hope they do away with too many 3 out of 4 matches because it's already overkill. WWE main event saw Cesaro, EC3, and Robert Roode defeat the Lucha House Party. And in a rematch, Dana Brooke defeated Sarah Logan. It was just a little boo-boo off the side of Dana Brooke's head. Nothing that serious. No concussion. No stitches were necessary. But Dana Brooke was seen during the commercials of Raw this week. Came out to the arena and tried to get everybody to show their guns and be happy for who you are. Don't let anyone talk you down. So positive messaging, and which I do like, which I do appreciate. 205 Live saw Jeff. who am I? Mike Adamle. Jack Gallagher defeat Mike Kanellis via pinfall after a headbutt. Humberto Carrillo defeated Rob Rollenbeck via pinfall after a top rope twisting splash for the win. Tony Nese would defeat Akira Tozawa via pinfall after a belly-to-back power driver to earn a title match against the new Cruiserweight champion, Drew Gulak, at Extreme Rules. So, once again, finding loopholes and former champions getting their rematches. NXT, you know what? The highlight of the show was the women's steel cage match for the NXT women's title. Although coming up short, Io Shirai, Shayna Baszler retained her title. If you did not see this match, you need to see this match. Io Shirai, I'm going to go as far and say, teased a heel turn here. And again, you have to see this match. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but put it this way, it was so good. When I'm done here, I'm going to watch it again when I get home. Mojo Rawley is the most recent superstar to re-sign with the WWE, although the details of said contract is unavailable or unknown. But according to Pro Wrestling Sheet, it is a multi-year deal, possibly 5-year deal, as usually extensions or re-signs last 3 to 5 years. This comes after we found out last week that Mike and Maria Kanellis have also re-signed with the WWE. Matt Riddle had an interview with RondaRousey.com and discussed about his possible match with Brock Lesnar in the WWE. Well, if this was to happen, I say do it in NXT in front of an NXT crowd, preferably one of the takeovers. So Matt Riddle discussing about Lesnar and their comparisons, especially having or being a member of MMA alumni. And Riddle sees this as a passing of the torch, in a sense, if the match were to take place. And even says in this quote, I think of it as more of passing of the torch. And the thing is, it's like one of those things. I feel like it would be a good way to go out as far as his match with Brock Lesnar. And speaking of MMA, Riddle has stated that the hardest thing he had ever had to do is to transition from MMA fights to pro wrestling and learning how to sell. Saying the hardest part is going from when you're actually hurt and not showing anybody anything on your face because you don't want them to know that you're hurt, to barely getting hurt and showing the world that you're dying. Well, that's what selling is all about, to exaggerate said injury. Even if it's pulling of the hair or being poked in the eye, you just gotta seriously go with the flow and just over-exaggerate. If anything, anyone following FIFA right now, we can take a few pointers from these players that just drop from a little gust of wind and accusing a player from the other team that he hurt him. I find it so entertaining, and it's just ridiculous at the same time. Daniel Cormier, UFC World Heavyweight Champion, spoke to TMZ and discussed how upset he was. Better yet, how disappointing to find out that his match with Brock Lesnar is not going to happen, perhaps never. Saying, I was disappointed. I wanted to fight Brock. I have known Brock for a long time. I competed with Brock for a long time in wrestling, and I've always been a fan of his. And we had that great moment at UFC 226. So the build was going to be fun, which was true. For those who don't remember, it was the night that Cormier defeated Stipe Miocic for the UFC heavyweight title. And Lesnar, still on the WWE contract, was an invited guest by Dana White and was cage side and was invited in. And there was a bit of a wrestling angle. I mean, think about it. Lesnar shoves Cormier. Cormier kind of powder puffed him back, but one of Cormier's cornermen actually shoved Lesnar, but I guess Lesnar didn't think much of it and just ignored it. And so the writing was on the wall. But months later, shortly after WrestleMania this year, Lesnar retired from MMA. I guess sometimes if you're Lesnar, you just got to follow where the money goes. And in some cases, where the paycheck comes from. Doesn't matter who signs them. It's a paycheck. There are funds in that account that you can transfer or cash into yours. Who cares? I'm getting my money. Rey Mysterio is nearly cleared to return to the ring after having a shoulder injury at the hands of Samoa Joe. Complete accident, by the way. After Mysterio defeated Joe for the United States title, only for a few weeks later to surrender it due to said injury. But Mysterio is looking for a July 8th return, which is a Monday, and Raw will be in Newark, New Jersey. And everyone, that being backstage WWE personnel, pending a medical clearance by then. So Mysterio will more than likely spend that weekend with his personal doctors and share the results with WWE doctors. And from there, they would make a decision of whether or not to clear him and have Rey Mysterio involved somehow with Raw that night. Kyle O'Reilly was scheduled to compete this weekend at the Evolve show in New York. Unfortunately, will not be able to make it. Evolve put out a statement saying, "We are sorry to inform you that Evolve will not have Kyle O'Reilly competing this weekend. We were just given the news, and we will have more information and update our cards later today or tomorrow. Thank you for your understanding." This was earlier on in the week that the news broke. Kyle O'Reilly is unfortunately injured and will be replaced by Tyler Breeze. Not a bad replacement. I mean, Tyler Breeze, after returning to NXT, has a tremendous showing. A great match with Velveteen Dream back in NXT TakeOver. So fans should be getting their money's worth this weekend at Evolve. Kenny Omega responded to, or actually put out a tweet in regards to a previous tweet that was deleted, which I'll share here in a moment. But the response to the deleted tweet, Kenny tweeted, "I've said my piece and opened the door to a very toxic environment. It wasn't a message to the fans or the boys, just the decision makers. I wish everyone wrestling on any show that day all the best. That is all." So Kenny Omega is responding to many fans saying, "Hey, what happened to your old tweet? I think that was spot on. Maybe a bit controversial. I mean, the entire ordeal is not specifically involving Kenny Omega or AEW. But I ask, is he lying?" So the tweet in question goes, "If lining your pockets with blood money is okay, then what's wrong with trying to undermine a charity show for victims of gun violence?" Omega has now deleted the tweet. And he's referring to July 13th, where Evolve has come to an agreement with WWE to air Evolve's 10th anniversary show that will feature several NXT superstars and will air live on the network. On the same day, AEW is having Fight for the Fallen charity event. As Kenny Omega mentioned, for those who have suffered or have had experience or has lost a loved one due to gun violence. I'm pretty sure there will be cameras for the event, but there wasn't any word, not that I'm aware of, that AEW's Fight for the Fallen show will be broadcasting anywhere. Maybe on Fight TV. Again, I'm not sure. But at first, it seemed Kenny was very upset about this. Again, is he wrong? And the blood money he's referring to, and it's obvious. Ever since the Saudi journalist that was killed in the embassy, I believe it was the Turkish embassy. This was right before WWE was going to head out there and have the crown jewel. I hesitate to reference these events because of what happened and how they treated it. All they've done was not announce the name of the country that the events are being held in. Hence why if you do that, then it's parts unknown. But right before Crown Jewel is when the unfortunate incident and the death of the journalist took place. A lot of finger pointing, a lot of pressure from Congress, from from even their own congressman in Connecticut, WWE, to either postpone or cancel the show because of what happened and who more than likely, allegedly, had a hand in it and gave the order to take the life of the journalist. Mr. Khashoggi, I believe. If I mispronounced his name, I apologize. So being upset at WWE, I do not blame Kenny Omega for at all. But he'll add, I hear that healthy competition is supposed to be good, supposed to be a good thing, and yet I can't help but feel like I'm going to be sick. This has happened before. WWE has a history of this. Going back to the old Jim Crockett promotions, going back to the old NWA days. Starrcade, the first one, went head-to-head with Survivor Series. I'm sorry, I believe it was the 1997 Starrcade went head-to-head with the first ever Survivor Series. Cable companies were forced to choose which one to carry. And Vince, for lack of a better term, manipulated several of them, and they chose to carry the WWF's show instead of the NWA, which many did not get to see and had to wait for the home video release. Now, is that business or is that being a dick? And I agree. What the hell ever happened to competition? Now, this is not WCW you're dealing with, even though they've undermined a few things themselves. They pulled some unnecessary strings and went to places they probably should not have, but, I mean, there's no payoff. You might have gotten your attention that first time and it rose your rating number a bit, but the follow-up, was it just as high? No, they were not. So WWE being a little or very much bitter here for no reason whatsoever. The Evolve 10th anniversary show would have gone on as scheduled regardless. But seeing that AEW will probably won't have a broadcast or streaming service of their Fight for the Fallen event, well, I can't watch AEW, so great countering programming. WWE is going to air an Evolve show. From a business standpoint, I can vaguely agree. At the same time, I can understand and appreciate Kenny Omega's comments and feelings about this. But I just hope AEW can get as big, if not bigger, than WWE. And if necessary and need be, have them pull some strings to prevent WWE from having certain shows or certain broadcasting from said venue or on a network that's not theirs. Time will tell. So the biggest news of the week, WWE this past Thursday has essentially rehired Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff to be executive directors of Raw and SmackDown, respectively. And this is a legit announcement. No storylines involved. Besides being a advocate for Brock Lesnar, Paul Heyman will have no other on-air role, just like Eric Bischoff will not have no on-air performance or role of any kind. Be interesting to see. I don't believe it started yet, other than the announcement, but this goes back a few weeks, maybe a few months, according to PW Insider, to try to get this deal between both Bischoff and Heyman. Now, is this a desperate cry out for help because of recent activities or lack thereof in WWE when it comes to the ratings? Recently been steady, but there were times where it was lower than expected. Feedback was all but negative for WWE on social media. And of course, the ridiculous sale numbers for ticket sales for pay-per-view and Monday Night Raw, and sometimes on SmackDown. There have been more half-arena SmackDown shows than there have been Raw. So according to BW Insider, who can exclusively confirm this, their words, the offer was made to Heyman to come on board full-time as a top member of the creative team around the same time that Bruce Pritchard was brought back as senior vice president. At that time, unfortunately, conversations were slowly progressing. But a deal was agreed upon and reached, and Heyman agreed to sign, and he's on board. However, for Eric Bischoff, it was a little bit different. The deal came across about several weeks ago. And of course, everybody knows about Eric Bischoff's pre-production plans with Netflix and the Hulk Hogan biography movie. Wonder how much of WWE's fingerprints will be all over that. But it was around that time that WWE has reached out to Bischoff to come on board, and as agreed. I'm sure salary-wise might have held back the conversation a little bit, but it's understandable as well. But here's the funny bit. Fox was never told of such a deal, as WWE has built up their relationship with SmackDown's new home. To say that this is a massive return in the form of Bischoff is a huge understatement. According to BW Insider, they said that we are told that WWE approached him about the role, and Bischoff's previous works in Turner Broadcasting and Spike TV, among other networks, was the build-up and reason in order to pitch Bischoff the idea and the position, which eventually he accepted. And they will all be directly answering to the big honcho himself, Vince McMahon. Once again, there are no plans to have them as on-air talent or characters other than Heyman being the advocate for Brock Lesnar. So what does this mean? Well, obviously they're going back to what used to work. Hopefully they won't try to bring back someone else, bro. Because let's face it, I doubt that person can get along with anyone that's there right now. I'm sure there are others that say, no, we're friends, we get along and this and that, fine. But the overall picture, and you want to get backlash, you want to get negative feedback, do not hire that person or his friend back into this company. As I mentioned, Fox was not aware of this. Dave Meltzer even chimed in, saying that I do know that the Fox people had no idea this was coming, in referring to hiring Heyman and Bischoff as executive directors. He'll go on to say, he then went on to say that he wanted the other guy. So Fox, Meltzer basically saying that Fox would have preferred Heyman over Bischoff for some reason to control SmackDown. But that wasn't WWE's plan. They wanted one person to control Raw and another to control SmackDown. So who better, especially in that position, to have that much experience than to call up Bischoff? And Bischoff, if and whenever he goes back into the Hall of Fame for the first time, this will be the building block for it. I'm not saying he'll go in next year, which will make some sense if you think about it. Even Heyman. But I think Heyman will take much longer to go in, as his work is not done yet. Bischoff is all but shied away from the pro wrestling business as a whole and just does a lot of production on TV shows, reality shows, and of course on the upcoming Hogan biopic with Chris Hemsworth for Netflix. So as of right now, this is all we know. And Meltzer even admitted that he doesn't have that much information in the hirings of Heyman and Bischoff for now. But moving forward, should be very interesting to see if they can be the saving grace for WWE television. The product, if I can be so nice, is stale. at the very least. Little to no interest in storylines. Those who have been released or had contract expires and have spoken out, hence Jon Moxley, basically saying that the company is toxic to work in. Seth Rollins recently replied to that. If you're in the position of Seth Rollins and being the company's top champions, the last thing you want to do is go rogue and either agree with the negative comments or make some your own, or make up some of your own negative comments on a podcast or an interview. Rollins basically said that he's happy that Moxley's gone, the former Dean Ambrose, and took his ball and went somewhere else. If you can't handle it, then you shouldn't be here. Which I found a little bit funny considering the times Ambrose was hurt and was basically forced back to have a reunion Shield, not have it, then have it again. That on and off Shield reunion before Roman Reigns went down with his sickness. And before that, Ambrose was hurt himself. And Kurt Angle became the honorary member of the Shield for one night only. So, was there anything that Moxley said that wasn't true? I mean, I don't think he mentioned that much or complained much about the scheduling. I mean, that goes without saying. You sign up with WWE, chances are you're traveling every single day. And if you're lucky, you'll go home for one day, maybe two, depending how much they're using you. But Seth Rollins, I look at it like he was responding corporately. He had no other way to put it. To go out there, try to put WWE back in a positive light and try to rub off some of that negativity because of what Moxley's been saying for nearly 2 weeks now, and others. But it shouldn't come from the talent. At least when it comes to trying to shine a new light on them. We hear from talent all the time that gets released and how bad it is, that McMahon doesn't know what he's doing. The creative is not that creative. The agents don't know what they're doing, and working with so-and-so, you can't get along with them because they don't want to sell, they don't want to lay down, or whatever the excuses are. I believe there's some truth to all of that. And because the second party is still with WWE and may or may not never leave the company, so we'll never truly feel or hear the other side of the story. If we do, it's what Seth Rollins did, giving a corporate answer. I don't see Vince McMahon doing too many more podcasts like he did with Stone Cold for the first ever episode on the network, and try to be as open as possible, but still talking a lot of bullshit out of both ends of him. It's unfortunate because McMahon is intelligent, but when it comes to defend his company, defend himself, I mean, he'll throw all the big words at you, but you still kind of feel, maybe because I've been listening and watching for such a long time, others may not see or agree with me, and that's fine. But after a while, you kind of feel like I'm not hearing the entire story, Vince. You're not answering the question. You just wrenched it off into something else. Or you just give us a half-ass answer and that's it. What's your next question? But that's just how the pro wrestling business is. Stone Cold said what he said when he left, and later on admitted that was the biggest professional mistake of his life, and he made amends with WWE, even though being fined, what was it, $250,000? I mean, wasn't he fired? How can you fine someone that was already fired? But whatever. And here we are with Moxley. I don't know if he's done any more interviews before this week. And Rollins coming out saying what he said. You know, you can't hang, you can't hang. And for how many years did we hear, well, of course, before the original breakup between Rollins, Ambrose, and Reigns, how close they are, how much of brothers they consider each other. That didn't sound too brotherly love when Rollins said what he said. Again, hindsight and looking behind the scenes, there isn't anything wrong that Rollins said. I dare say that's what he was told to say, or something along those lines, if ever asked about Dean Ambrose. And what do you think, or what does WWE think of Jon Moxley going around and saying what he's saying about the company internally? Before I wrap up, there's a couple of more stories I want to get to. One being, I've said this before, I try not to involve politics in my coverage here of the news and pro wrestling. But sometimes you will hear a familiar name. Now, there were rumors months ago that Linda McMahon was debating or possibly resigning from her position in Washington, D.C. as the Small Business Administrator. However, Axios, who's been known to unravel and uncover a lot of political documents, have obtained and leaked nearly 100 internal campaign vetting documents on candidates in the current administration. And yes, one of them is former WWE CEO Linda McMahon. Now, a lot of you are going to agree or disagree with the list of nearly 15 red flags that were brought up and ignored as far as how Mrs. McMahon got to the position that she has currently in Washington. Some of said 15 red flags are redacted. The documents had there were a lot to take in, but thankfully it was shortened to a list, basically a title of each red flag of the said documents. Of said red flags basically will lead to questioning. Well, if this is what she was either part of or something that she was aware of, how can anyone receive a position, in this case, administrator of small businesses? Well, some of these red flags are going to sound familiar to your longtime pro wrestling fans. Others, not so much. She has donated to several Democratic mayors, representatives, and senators over the years, including Tom Allen and Stephanie Hunter Sanchez. A couple of names that are on a naughty list. She has paid property taxes late several times in 1984. Said some of the comments made towards women from number 45 were deplorable. But yeah, look who she works for now. Other red flags. She took nearly $3 million in taxpayer money to subside for WWE while criticizing government bailouts. Has faced a few lawsuits over sexual harassment. WWE has poorly represented gay characters in the past, specifically citing a 2004 segment where a wrestler attacked a man in drag while shouting out the F word. The F word that's not ending in UCK. Companies who represent the Arab Americans was also referenced as they call them sand people. The Chris Benoit murder-suicide was referenced and how a doctor specialized in brain injuries said that it could be work-related. And you know what? That ended up being true. Hence why we don't have no more chair shots to the head. McMahon, as in Linda McMahon, has gone on record to discredit studies that link concussions to brain damage. Like she's such an expert. The affiliation with Dr. George Zahorian was found guilty by distributing drugs to wrestlers. The 1993 steroid distribution and the case against Vince McMahon. Despite McMahon guaranteeing that wrestlers on steroids won't work in WWE in 93, but 65 had died from heart attacks in a 7-year span in 2004. And finally, a document that was mentioned, that was leaked, that was not redacted. WWE denying their wrestlers benefits and classified them as independent wrestlers. Now, none of this, well, maybe some, should be a shock to wrestling fans. McMahon obviously got the job despite of all this. And there's a lot more worth digging around. Not only from these leaked documents, but more so from media archives, news coverage. Of course, Linda McMahon has denied to comment on any of this leaked documents. My question is, why now? I don't know too much of this Axios group, but this is what they do. Speaking of not addressing anything publicly, I think this should be one of them. But if you're a McMahon, you know they're not going to do this. They're going to either wait till things get resolved, settled, or long forgotten. But not in this day and age. Definitely not. But you know what? It is what it is. If this had, it's ironic that she was contemplating leaving the administration, and now this happens. So I don't know if it's going to push her decision even faster to leave, but time will tell. But again, this should not come as any surprise as to the ins and outs of what the McMahons have done, what they would admit to, and the things that they haven't done, even though facts have been proven. But they still go on and they're in business. In the bigger picture, I'm sure any of us wrestling fans complain this much. I mean, is there ever gonna be any kind of change whatsoever as far as removing someone from a position they probably shouldn't have, or from a power that they somehow was given, received, or earned, whatever, and had that taken from them as well? The wrestling business, on its own, it's complicated as it is. History has shown how fucked up it can get, if I'm going to be honest. And you can look back from the early 1900s, from screw jobs to backstabbing to just straight up corruption, stealing from the promoter's purse, not paying your talent at all. It's still a business that's still going. It'd be easy to create your own small independent company and have it as clean as possible. But you can try to avoid it all you want, but sooner or later, there's going to be that one bad seed that's going to ruin everything, all your hard work if you're a promoter, especially, or if you're a booker. I could be wrong, but I don't see any change anytime soon when it comes to Linda McMahon leaving office. If it does, well, I'll be damned. If this leak has anything to do with it, well, I guess kudos all around for Axios, I think they're pronounced. But there's a race coming up next year, and we'll just see how things go. Finally, TMZ Sports has reported that the prosecutors have dropped any and all charges against Terry Reynolds. You remember she was caught with a loaded handgun on her person while trying to enter through a security checkpoint as she was heading to Pennsylvania back on May 29th to be a part of a fundraising event for Samu Anawani, who unfortunately is battling stage 4 cancer and trying to get money raised to have a surgical procedure done. So Miss Reynolds can now smile and move on this, but hopefully something like this won't happen again. Reynolds had a handgun. She was trying to track down and kill an armadillo that apparently has been ripping to shreds her mother's property. I don't know what the protocol on that is, but if armadillos are known to be this vicious, I guess something like a handgun would suffice in order to get your point across. But I don't think going on Terry Reynolds' video when she explains herself a couple of weeks ago, I don't think her intent is to kill said armadillo. It's just to get it off the property and not come back again, basically to scare it away. Had Miss Reynolds been found guilty, she would have been charged up to 5 years in prison and a $5,000 fine. And this would be considered a Class 3 felony. So, yeah, she dodged the bullet here, no pun intended. And good to see that she can basically continue with life on a new slate, so to speak. As she looked very scared, very intimidated of what happened. And definitely take this as a learning lesson. Now, when people say make sure you got everything before you head to the airport, I don't think it included a handgun in your bag or on your person. So, lesson learned. So, last thing before I leave, just want to let you know that there will be a new Talking with JM episode coming up real soon. I'll be interviewing the returning Hollywood, the original Glow Girl, along with Lightning, another original Glow Girl, and Lady Oyanka. Who? Lady Oyanka, a former female boxer and kickboxer out of New York City. I'll have a group discussion on Talking with JM, trying to get to know all these ladies. And it should be a fun ride, so tune in for that coming up this weekend. But until next time on the JM Report, everyone enjoy your summer. Be good, behave, be kind.
Today, I found the strength to open my eyes, leave it all behind. So open your mind and realize that your beautiful world could take my life. And I'm sinking under, drowning faster. Please just let me breathe.